This bang started the first nuclear age. The United States invented a new weapon that could destroy an entire city, and used it twice. Suddenly, total annihilation was just one decision away. Scientists tried to warn the world with a doomsday clock they set to just 7 minutes to midnight. But they had to move it closer, because the Soviet Union built a bomb, sparking an arms race. By 1986, the two superpowers had enough nukes to destroy the planet, 54 times over. So the clock ticked to 3 minutes. But then the Soviet Union fell, and the second nuclear age began. Rivals became friends, and world leaders cut down their arsenals. Some even called for their elimination.
I will lay out an agenda to seek the goal of a world without nuclear weapons.
The clock rolled back to 17 minutes. But that's as far as it got. Over the next decade, it ticked back towards midnight, and today, it's just 1 minute and 29 seconds away as we find ourselves on the cusp of a third nuclear age.
More complex and perilous chapter.
The arms control regime has been whittled away.
The salience of nuclear weapons is going up.
Now, I asked experts to characterize what this third nuclear age looks like, and while they all said different things, they agreed on largely two things. First, it's got all the ingredients to be the most dangerous nuclear age ever.
This relatively benign international system has shifted. It's become more competitive.
Hugely destabilizing and very dangerous.
Nuclear is back.
And two, just how dangerous depends a lot on this guy.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Nuclear weapons that are big monsters that can blow your heads off for miles and miles, which could happen tomorrow.
So what exactly makes the third nuclear age so much more dangerous? And will Donald Trump pull us back from the brink or push us over it? All right, there's a lot I could say about nuclear weapons, and if you're looking for a super deep dive, Johnny Harris has you covered.
There is a nuclear weapon headed towards the city right now.
He's got a video coming out tomorrow that goes real deep on the science of nuclear weapons and the intricacies of deterrence strategy. In this video, I'm more interested in a narrow set of questions. We thought we put the threat of nuclear war behind us. How'd we let it make a comeback? And of course, what is Donald Trump going to do about it? So let's begin by looking at what made the first nuclear age so dangerous and the second so much safer. In the first, 7 countries acquired nuclear weapons, but the US and Soviet Union built enough to destroy the planet, and their competition made it more likely they would destroy the planet. In the 1950s, the US built a plane that could drop a nuclear bomb deep inside Soviet territory, something the Soviets couldn't match. This gap created fear in the Soviet Union that the US would strike while it had the advantage. So they raced to build bombers, then ICBMs, missile that could carry a nuke through space. Suddenly, it was the US's turn to fear getting attacked. This competition increased the odds that one country would misunderstand the other and launch an attack. It almost happened in 1962, when the US saw the Soviets moving missiles to Cuba and feared the worst.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation as an attack, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
The Cuban Missile Crisis helped convince the US and Soviet Union that their competition needed some ground rules, so they signed arms control treaties. The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty banned above-ground testing, SALT I froze the number of ICBMs each side could deploy, and the INF Treaty banned intermediate-range missiles. These served as counterweights to their competition, but couldn't stop it. Two superpowers competing against each other with 60,000 nuclear weapons was just too dangerous. That's why in the first nuclear age, Armageddon seemed just around the corner.
Imagine a room awash in gasoline. One of them has 9,000 matches. The other has 7,000 matches. That's the kind of situation we are actually in.
But in the second nuclear age, that competition ended. The US and Russia reduced their arsenals dramatically, and they signed more treaties. They convinced former Soviet states like Ukraine to give up their nuclear weapons. In the START Treaty, they limited how many warheads each could deploy, then in New START, limited them even further. The chief negotiator for the US was Rose Gottmuller.
It was a period of fantastic cooperation. President Putin redoubled efforts to cooperate with the United States during that period and get nuclear weapons under control, safely guarded, get materials secure, etc.
But world leaders didn't want more nukes to ruin the peace. So they extended the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, where 191 countries promised to never acquire nukes, and the US extended its nuclear umbrella. During the Cold War, it promised to protect these allies with American nuclear weapons, so they wouldn't build their own. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the US decided to keep its promise and include several former communist states, so they wouldn't either. In this second nuclear age, rivals India and Pakistan got nukes, so did North Korea. But fewer weapons and more agreements created a more stable balance. It just didn't last very long. I want to highlight this great report that came out last week by SIPRI about this new nuclear arms race. But what I found interesting is, and you can probably imagine, the political left, center, and right have different feelings about it. Now, I'm able to stay on top of all these political perspectives thanks to Ground News. Ground News is the only website and app that doesn't just track world events, but dissects them. It gathers stories from all over the world and gives me a clear sense of how every story is being covered. In this case, you've got outlets on the left emphasizing the threat of this arms race, and you've got outlets on the right emphasizing the edge these competitors have over each other. Subtle but pretty interesting difference. But to cut through any speculation, I can filter to include only centrist sources, those posted recently, and those with high factuality. Ground News uses the same tags on every story, so you've got all the information you need on hand. And I love this great interactive map feature. I use it to find stories around the world, especially stories that aren't being covered by the Western media. Now today, wars are being fought with weapons as much as information, so it's great to have all the information you need on hand. And as the world gets more complicated, I know Search Party viewers understand this, and they want to really cut through the noise. So right now, we're partnering with Ground News. It'll get you 40% off their Advantage plan. That's what I use every day, using this code or the QR code. Now, Ground News and I share the same mission: make the news more transparent and understandable for everybody. Thanks to Ground News for continuing to support our work. Now I'll take you back to the episode. By now, you probably know the US-Russia relationship fell apart.
НАТО – это серьезно провоцирующий фактор.
Fierce battle broke out today on the fringe of the former Soviet Union.
Russian tanks and troops
spreading out throughout the Crimean Peninsula.
In the capital of Ukraine, the sound of missile strikes and air sirens.
But this aggression cannot go unanswered.
By the late 2010s, they were rivals again and abandoned several of their arms control treaties. In 2019, the US withdrew from the INF Treaty after accusing Russia of violating it. And in 2023, Russia stopped complying to the New START Treaty.
Russia will suspend its commitment to the key nuclear treaty with the United States.
This is paving the way for a new arms race. In the 2000s, Russia poured billions into modernizing its nuclear forces. It didn't add warheads, but it did introduce new ways to use them. This hypersonic missile can carry a nuclear warhead and possibly slip past US air defenses. And this autonomous nuclear-armed underwater drone can allegedly outrun US naval defenses. Russia is also building more low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. And as the war in Ukraine escalated, Putin lowered the bar for using them. In 2024, Putin declared Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons, not only in response to a nuclear attack, but also a conventional one.
Мы считаем для себя возможным использовать все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Нельзя относиться к этому легко.
Now the big question is, how will the US respond? In the 2010s, the US began modernizing its nuclear forces. And while the US hasn't increased its arsenal, it is worried about Russia's new weapons. In 2025, the US military requested to increase its budget for hypersonic research due to the advances in these technologies in Russia. If the New START Treaty expires in 2026, both will be free to build as many nukes as they want. Now, another US-Russia nuclear arms race is one thing, but the problem is in the third nuclear age, it won't just be those two.
China's missile program could soon be able to deploy a nuclear-tipped missile.
China currently has around 600 warheads, but plans to match the US and Russia, possibly by 2035. These extra nukes are just part of the problem. The other is that the world's never dealt with a three-way nuclear competition before. The Cold War was one-on-one. The US and Soviet Union just had to match each other's nuclear forces to establish deterrence.
This strategic dilemma came to be called mutual assured destruction.
But if China teams up with Russia, they could deter the US without the US being able to deter them. In this two-on-one competition, China and Russia can do whatever they want.
Mischief occurs under the cover of a nuclear deterrent force. China grabs Taiwan, Russia grabs Ukraine, maybe some other NATO member states. This was a wake-up call in the first Trump administration where people said, not sure we can think about eliminating nuclear weapons anymore.
This three-way competition could result in more nuclear weapons. It could also result in more nuclear states.
Calls are growing here for South Korea to have its own nuclear weapons.
That Iran could now make enough nuclear material for a bomb.
If they get one, we have to get one.
Several states are already considering acquiring nukes, straining the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. At the same time, some U.S. allies are starting to doubt the reliability of the U.S. nuclear umbrella.
If you don't pay your bills, we're not going to participate, we're not going to protect you.
Comments like these by Donald Trump are leading some European states to look for a backup plan. One idea is for France and the UK to create a new European nuclear umbrella. Just this month, the UK and France pledged to work together to deploy nuclear weapons if allies in Europe come under extreme threat. But to credibly replace the US nuclear umbrella, both countries would need to build a lot more warheads and weaponry.
The UK is limited in some extent. It relies on one submarine that's hidden somewhere in the North Atlantic. It doesn't have a platform it could deploy to parts of Europe to signal or to sort of show resolve. And changing that would be expensive, not quick, and potentially quite politically destabilizing.
Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea are considering building their own nukes too. A recent poll shows that more than 70% of South Koreans are now in favor of it.
There's no immediate reason the states should rush to do it, but we're probably at a point where it's more likely than it has been for quite a long time.
If these countries acquire nukes, it would not only add more risk, it could start a domino effect where other countries build nukes too, causing the remaining arms control treaties to fall apart. This is the third nuclear age, worst case scenario. But we aren't there yet. So can we still avoid it?
There are ways that the president could back us off the third nuclear age and return us to an era of nuclear control and even reduction.
We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
Now, in his first term, you probably remember, Donald Trump sounded pretty cavalier about using nuclear weapons.
I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works.
But in his second term, he actually sounds a lot more cautious.
It's just bad that everybody has to spend all this money on something that if it's used, it's probably the end of the world.
In February, Trump even proposed a nuclear deal with Russia and China. He hasn't made any progress yet. But here's how he can. First, Trump can still negotiate or extend the New START treaty with Russia, putting the brakes on their competition, ideally while the U.S. is still modernizing its nuclear forces.
Then the United States has the great potential to build up and deploy more warheads and delivery vehicles. So it doesn't make any sense to me from a Russian perspective to simply walk away from the negotiating table now.
China's unlikely to strike a similar deal until it matches the US and Russia. But Trump can at least start a dialogue so that their buildup doesn't create any surprises.
The first step should be to convince them that it helps them to have some predictability about what's going on in the US nuclear modernization program. And to do that, they have to be willing to give us a bit of predictability, talk to us about what their objectives are with their nuclear modernization.
Finally, Trump can recommit to the US nuclear umbrella. And that's the easiest part. He just has to remind his allies that he's got their back.
Nuclear deterrence is a mind game. It must be the president himself who speaks up and says, we are continuing reliably to extend a nuclear security guarantee to our allies.
The third nuclear age doesn't have to be the most dangerous one. We know how to manage the risks. We've done it before. All right, that's episode 30 of Search Party, and it's also our 2-year anniversary. So thanks to all of you that have been here since July 2023, and thanks to everyone who's just recently joined. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We cover sports and geopolitics. We come out every couple of weeks. We've got a story coming up next month about soccer, which I think you'll enjoy. We haven't covered soccer for a while. And then we're going to really ramp up in the fall, so expect a lot of great stories then. If you haven't yet checked out Tunnel Vision, that's my colleague Christoph. He does incredible work figuring out what is going on deep in the corners of the internet. All right, that's it for now. We'll see you in a couple weeks.